For most of my life, I followed a routine that many people would recognize. Waking up early, commuting through crowded streets, sitting at the same desk for 8 hours, and counting down the minutes until I could go home. My life was safe and predictable, but it also felt small. I dreamed of seeing the world, of waking up in new places, of working from anywhere. Yet, like so many others, I believed that was impossible. Then one day, everything changed the day I decided to become a digital nomad. The idea had always fascinated me. People who worked from beaches, mountains, and cafes around the world seemed to live a different kind of freedom, one that combined technology with adventure. But behind those dreamy images on social media, I knew there must be struggle, uncertainty, and countless lessons. Still, something deep inside me wanted to try. It began with one simple question: what if I could work from anywhere? At the time, I had a stable office job in marketing. My work was mostly online, but my company required everyone to be physically present. When the global shift toward remote work began, I saw my chance. I proposed to my manager that I could handle my tasks from home. To my surprise, she agreed. That moment opened a door that I never planned to close again. Working remotely at first felt strange. The boundaries between work and life disappeared. There were no office sounds, no co-workers to chat with, just the quiet hum of my laptop. Yet there was also an unexpected thrill, the realization that I could do my job from anywhere in the world. That thought became an obsession. So I started preparing for a new chapter. I sold things I did not need, stored sentimental items at a friend's house, and began researching digital nomad communities. I read countless blogs about visas, co-working spaces, and affordable destinations. The idea no longer felt impossible. It felt like a challenge waiting to be accepted. My first destination was Chiang Mai, Thailand, a city known as a digital nomad hub. When I arrived, everything felt different. The warm air, the smell of street food, the sight of people from every corner of the world working together in small cafes. For the first time, I realized I was part of a global movement. People who had chosen freedom over routine and experience over comfort. Life as a digital nomad was not easy, but it was deeply rewarding. I learned to live light, carrying only what I truly needed: my laptop, headphones, and a few clothes. I learned how to manage time across time zones, how to stay productive despite distractions, and how to find Wi-Fi in the most unexpected places. Every day taught me something new, not just about work, but about myself. There were moments of loneliness, too. Traveling alone can make you feel invisible, especially when everyone around you speaks a different language. But those moments also helped me grow stronger and more independent. I discovered that solitude can be a teacher. It makes you appreciate small connections even more. One morning, while working in a cafe overlooking the mountains, I realized something profound. I was no longer just working for a paycheck. I was working for a lifestyle. My work gave me the freedom to design my days, to explore new cultures, meet inspiring people, and learn in ways no classroom could teach. Over time, I moved to other destinations: Bali, Lisbon, and Mexico City. Each place gave me new experiences, new friends, and new challenges. In Bali, I learned the art of balance, how to work efficiently while living close to nature. In Lisbon, I experienced the power of community, sharing ideas with entrepreneurs from around the world. In Mexico City, I rediscovered creativity through the energy of its streets and culture. But perhaps the most important lesson I learned was about discipline. Many people think the digital nomad lifestyle is pure freedom, but in reality, it requires structure. Without a routine, it is easy to lose focus or motivation. I created my own rhythm: mornings for work, afternoons for exploration, evenings for reflection. That balance became the secret to sustaining my new life. Technology played a huge role in my transformation, with cloud storage, project management tools, and video meetings. I could collaborate with clients as if I were sitting next to them. Artificial intelligence tools helped me organize tasks, translate languages, and even plan travel routes. The digital world became my workspace: unlimited, borderless, and full of opportunity. Still, there were times when uncertainty hit hard. Flight cancellations, poor internet connections, and unexpected costs sometimes made me question my choices. But every obstacle reminded me that freedom always comes with responsibility. The key was not to run away from challenges, but to adapt to them. As months turned into years, I realized that being a digital nomad was not just about traveling, it was about mindset. It taught me to value time more than money, experiences more than possessions, and learning more than comfort. It was about creating a life that felt truly mine. Now, when people ask me if I miss my old office life, I smile. I tell them that I do miss some things: the sense of stability, the predictable routine. But then I think about all the sunrises I have seen in new cities, all the friends I have made from different cultures, and all the moments when I worked with inspiration instead of obligation. Becoming a digital nomad did not just change where I worked, it changed who I was. It turned me into someone adaptable, curious, and courageous. It taught me that the world is both bigger and smaller than I imagined, big enough to explore endlessly, yet small enough to connect with anyone, anywhere, through a screen. As I write these words from a small cafe by the ocean, I can hear the waves crashing against the shore. My office is wherever my laptop opens, my co-workers are scattered across continents, and my routine is guided by passion instead of pressure. The journey to becoming a digital nomad was not easy, but it was worth every uncertain step. Because in the end, it gave me the greatest gift of all: the freedom to choose how I live, where I work, and who I become. When the global microchip shortage hit, it wasn't just about missing gadgets or delayed phone launches. It was about the invisible threads that held our modern world together suddenly snapping. For years, we had built our lives around devices powered by tiny silicon chips, each no bigger than a fingernail, yet essential for everything from cars to hospitals, from satellites to refrigerators. And then, almost overnight, the world realized just how fragile that system was. It began quietly in 2020 when pandemic lockdowns halted manufacturing lines. At first, it seemed temporary. But as demand for electronics surged, laptops for remote work, gaming consoles for entertainment, medical equipment for overwhelmed hospitals, factories simply couldn't keep up. By 2023, the problem had evolved into a full-scale crisis. Cars sat unfinished in factories, smartphones doubled in price, and even power grids began to feel the strain. I remember the exact moment it hit me personally. My car stopped working one morning, and when I took it to the mechanic, he sighed. "It's the chip," he said. "The replacement could take 6 months. Maybe a year. 6 months for a piece smaller than a coin." It sounded absurd, but the absurdity became our new normal. Suddenly, the modern comforts we'd taken for granted began slipping away. Supermarkets' payment systems went down more often. Smart homes malfunctioned. Factories paused production. It wasn't just a shortage, it was a reckoning, a reminder that the global supply chain we trusted was built on delicate balance and just-in-time efficiency, not resilience. Governments scrambled to respond. Nations launched chip independence projects, pouring billions into local manufacturing. But building a semiconductor plant wasn't like opening a bakery. It required precision engineering, rare materials, ultra-clean environments, and years of setup. For ordinary people like me, that meant adapting fast. At first, I tried to ignore it. But then my laptop began showing signs of wear, and replacing it wasn't an option. New models were scarce and overpriced. So I learned the art of digital minimalism. Repairing instead of replacing, reusing instead of upgrading. It was strangely empowering. I scavenged old parts, watched repair tutorials, and joined online communities dedicated to surviving the tech drought. One of the biggest lessons I learned was how dependent we'd become on chips for even the simplest tasks. My coffee maker had a microcontroller. So did my washing machine. When they failed, they didn't just stop working, they froze entirely, waiting for a component that might never come. I realized how deeply technology had woven itself into every corner of my life, and how little control I actually had. But innovation thrives under pressure across the world. Creative minds began finding workarounds. Engineers redesigned devices to use fewer or older chips. Startups revived analog technologies. Some companies even reused chips from recycled electronics, creating what they called circular computing. It was a fascinating blend of necessity and ingenuity, the human spirit adapting to scarcity. I joined a local tech co-op formed during the shortage. We traded parts, shared tools, and helped each other repair old hardware. It felt almost revolutionary, a small rebellion against the idea that everything must be new, fast, and disposable. We began to value durability over design and cooperation over convenience. By 2024, governments had finally started seeing results from their domestic chip programs. But it was slow progress. The world had learned a hard truth. Dependence on a handful of factories in East Asia for something as vital as semiconductors was unsustainable. Every nation began investing in chip resilience, building not just capacity but diversity in production. The shortage changed the way industries thought. Automakers simplified their designs, reducing the number of chips per vehicle. Tech giants shifted toward modular hardware, allowing users to replace individual components instead of entire devices. Even ordinary consumers, like me, became more mindful. We started asking questions we'd never considered before. Where was this chip made? How secure is the supply chain? What happens if it stops again? Looking back, the shortage wasn't just a crisis. It was a transformation. It forced humanity to reconsider the relationship between technology and sustainability. For decades, we had pursued faster processors, smaller transistors, and cheaper production, but we hadn't built safety nets. When that fragile network cracked, the world staggered, yet it didn't fall. Personally, I came out of it more self-reliant, more curious. I learned to appreciate technology not as something disposable, but as something to preserve. I discovered that innovation isn't always about progress. Sometimes it's about resilience. Now, as I look at the headlines in 2025, announcing new semiconductor hubs in Europe, the US, and Southeast Asia, I feel a cautious optimism. The chip shortage reminded us that even the smallest component can have global consequences. It reminded us that in the race toward the future, we must build not just faster, but smarter. The microchip shortage tested humanity's adaptability, and we survived. Not by waiting for the world to fix itself, but by rethinking how we live within it.